Howdy, I'm Grey Pilgrim. Well, last night I was on a live forum. Well, I was in the comments, whatever you call it, where you type stuff in, on a show called 11 Bang Bang Reload. And Garrett and company were discussing horse pistols. So I said, well, Garrett, I've got a Colt Walker, which was the original horse pistol, and I've got a Colt Dragoon, which was the second horse pistol. But there's one you forgot, the Lamont. Now this is a Lamont next to a Walker. It's just about as heavy, but it holds more rounds. And since this was made with good steel, and this was made with basically cast iron, cast iron, but it was wasn't pot metal. It wasn't like a kettle or a skillet. This was beat iron, or I guess wrought iron, wrought iron, in which they tried to take most of the carbon out. Problem is they still were kind of brittle and weak, and folks would try to, well, two things happen. One, they would shove in a full 60 grains of powder, but the only way you really can get 60 grains of powder in a Walker, and I tried, you can get 50 grains in here, no problem. But 60 grains, not with a round ball, but with a conical, if you put it in backwards, you can get 60 grains in here. You will then probably blow up the gun, because they just weren't designed for that. By the time Colt came up with good steel, he was making the 1860s. Anyway, this one, on the other hand, was made probably, well, this one is made in Italy, but the ones in the Civil War were made in France or Belgium, Liège to be precise, and both versions are much better quality steel. And because of that, steel is not iron. This thing was probably a much more robust pistol. And plus, it had a 16 gauge shotgun barrel, the old grape shot barrel on this thing. It's called the grape shot revolver for a reason. It's also an 8-shot. Also, this is a 44 caliber. So is this at the moment, but the original Lamont was 41 caliber. Don't know why the difference, but that's what the good doctor designed, so that's what they did. But anyway, just that. And the other thing I wanted to talk about was something that was sort of bugging me. I'm nerding out on. Now get ready for a little bit of weird, remember high school English class history, where your teacher would tell you, well, the origins of, well, English goes back to three kinds: Old English, Middle English, and Modern English. And Old English sort of became Middle English, and she might have told you that Canterbury Tales was probably a good example of Middle English. But that Modern English came about because of one guy, Will Shakespeare. He wrote a bunch of plays, and he used the vernacular of English of his time and wrote it down. And that sort of fixed the spelling and the turn of phrase that we use to this very day. Well, this happened to other languages too. If you go down to Spain, there's a guy whose name was Cervantes who wrote a book called Don Quixote, which was a real fun book. I mean, if you're interested, read it. It's a fun book. It's about a old man who's a knight who wants to go out in the blaze of glory, basically, and he takes his servant, whose name's Sancho, and gets on his horse, which was named Rocinante, and it's all about tilting at windmills. It's a good book, but basically that book fixed Spanish as a written language, because before that it was basically the vernacular Latin of Iberia. In like manner, in the Italian peninsula itself, where Latin was the original language, it had devolved into many, many, many different dialects. Everything from Tuscan to Florentine to, well, Florentine is sort of a variant of Tuscan, to Neapolitan, to I mean, there were many kinds, and it just Viennese is one from Venice. But anyway, there was a guy, and the guy's name was Dante Alighieri, and like most, he wrote a poem. His poem was called the Commedia, and later a guy named Boccaccio changed that to Divina Commedia, or Divine Comedy. And it consisted of 3 parts, Paradisio, or Paradise, Inferno, or, well, the Inferno, and the middle one was Purgatorio, or Purgatory. And it shows the progression of the soul from hell, Inferno, through Purgatory, and into the Paradise of God. Okay, this is just getting geeky about this. The reason I'm talking about that is this. Besides old guns, I collect old guns, but I cannot collect really old books. This is a fragment, bound, but that is an actual copy from 1481 of a Florence edition of Dante Alighieri's, this is chapter 7 of Purgatorio, the middle book of the Divine Comedy. And the way it's written is kind of interesting. This is Florentine Italian here, and this part is a commentary in Latin. It's kind of interesting, and it's really interesting in that you see these blank spots here. Well, about 5 copies of this thing were woodcuts were included in it, and the woodcuts were I think Boccaccio did them, and they did them 5 different copies of this that have survived. By the way, the patron who paid for this was Lorenzo de Medici. This is one of the very first actual printed books ever written. It's kind of rare, and it cost me a pretty penny. I have 3 of these. They're called Incunabula, or Incunabula Typographia. It's from the Latin, and it means for the cradle of writing, or the cradle of printing. Before this, everybody wrote things out. Then Gutenberg came along, and he came up with this idea of pressing ink onto paper. Well, that got into Italy, and of course, Italy knows how to press wine out of grapes. So they went, hey, just take that grape press over there, and these plates that Gutenberg developed, put them together, and voila, we've got a printing press. The technology of the printing press went wide all over Europe, and basically created the Renaissance and later the Reformation, all the wars of the Martin Luther and all that stuff. It was the revolution that really changed. It was the internet of its day, and this is that day, 1481, guys. This is 11 years before Columbus discovered America, and I've got a book from that period in my hands here. Anything printed from about 1450, which is when Gutenberg did his thing, until 1501, scholars now call incunabula. And I own 3 of them. They're all fragments. I have a book by Petrarch, and I have a fragment of a Bible. The Petrarch is from Switzerland. The Bible is from, I think, Venice. Yeah, this is from Florence, and that's from Venice, right. Anyway, they were worth a pretty penny. I used to collect a lot of antique books, but one year I had not saved enough to pay my property tax, and I had to come up with some money quick. So I sold off my antiquarian book collection and other books I had. It hurt terribly, but it would have hurt more to lose the land, so they had to go. So I decided to take up gun collecting instead. And believe me, guns are fun. And I like antique guns. I like antiques. Guns and antiques, the concept goes well together. I would love to have an arquebus, or what's called a musket, or maybe a wheel lock. A matchlock would be fun to play with too. There's some companies that make replicas of those, but at the moment I'm saving up again for taxes. This time I'm saving for it, and really hurts to send that money off to the state or the county when this land belonged to my family many years before there was a county here to tax us on it. Really hurts. Anyway, guns and antique books. Really antique books. Just my nerdiness. Anyway, happy trails.